Who is Quaithe? She's been sending Daenerys visions and cryptic messages since Book 2, but what do they mean? And what does she want from Dany? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. On this channel we cover A Song of Ice and Fire in depth, as well as The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher. Welcome. We first meet Quaithe when she is part of the honour guard that escorts Daenerys into Qarth with her newly hatched dragons, one of 3 dignitaries along with Piat Pri and Zaro Joan Daxos. She doesn't say much then, just warning Dany to beware everyone, basically, because they will try to take her dragons from her. Quaithe follows this up later by telling Dany that she should leave the city while she still can. Dany asks where else she might go, and Quaithe says, "To go north, you must journey south. To reach the west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back. And to touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow." Asshai, Dany thought. She would have me go to Asshai. "Will the Asshai give me an army?" she demanded. "Will there be gold for me in Asshai? Will there be ships? What is there in Asshai that I will not find in Qarth?" "Truth," said the woman in the mask, and bowing, she faded back into the crowd. Dany's mind here goes to Asshai because Quaithe tells her that in order to go north and west, which is the direction of Westeros from where she is, she must go south and east, and the only place of any real note in that direction is Asshai, or to give it its full name, Asshai by the Shadow, which ties in with the idea of passing beneath the shadow. It's a quite literal interpretation of what Quaithe says, but Quaithe noticeably doesn't correct Dany. Instead, she allows her to go on thinking that that's where she should go, even telling her a reason why she might want to go there. And that's the last we see of Quaithe in person. As far as we know, she stays in Qarth, but she appears to Dany 3 more times as visions, perhaps through the use of glass candles. She first just repeats the same advice she gave before, probably as a way to identify herself, but then when Dany is in Meereen, Quaithe appears again to say, "The glass candles are burning. Soon comes the pale mare, and after her the others, Kraken and Dark Flame, Lion and Griffin, the Sun's Son and the Mummer's Dragon. Trust none of them. Remember the Undying. Beware the perfumed Seneschal." Now, at the time this seemed quite confusing to Dany, but with the knowledge of what's going on in the wider world, we can see that this is actually quite an accurate list of who or what will come to her in Meereen. The Pale Mare is the name of the plague that hits the city later in the story. Then there is a list of people who are currently trying to get to Dany, mostly unbeknownst to her. The Kraken is presumably Victarion Greyjoy, who has been sent by Euron. The Dark Flame is presumably Moqorro, the Red Priest. The Lion, presumably Tyrion, the Griffin, Jon Connington, the Sun's Son, Quentyn Martell, and the Mummer's Dragon, Aegon VI, or Young Griff if you prefer. This is new information, but the message is the same. Like before, Quaithe wants Dany not to trust any of them. She also wants her to remember the Undying, who Dany trusted, and then they tried to kill her, and we assume steal her dragons. And also throws in someone else, the perfumed Seneschal, who could be any one of 2 or 3 different people that Dany shouldn't trust. So Quaithe's interactions with Dany thus far were about building trust with her by telling her things that were yet to happen, telling her not to trust anyone else, and telling her that there's a truth in Asshai that she needs to hear. All clues to what Quaithe might want, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Because then we come to the final and most significant vision from Quaithe. It happens right at the end of A Dance with Dragons. Dany is out alone in the Dothraki Sea with Drogon. Then Quaithe appears with a mask made of starlight, saying, "Remember who you are, Daenerys. The dragons know. Do you?" What follows, which may or may not also be from Quaithe, are visions of Viserys, the only other Targaryen she ever knew, and Jorah Mormont telling her to get to Westeros already. The message is clear. Dany should be more Targaryen again. Because she hadn't been. She'd spent most of the last book ruling in Meereen, not going to Westeros, and making compromise after compromise, chaining up her dragons, marrying someone she didn't love, reopening the fighting pits, and so on. And then, taken out into the Dothraki Sea by Drogon, she is symbolically purged of all that was Meereen, her hair, her titles, even the contents of her stomach after she ate some dodgy berries. She's just a Targaryen, on her own with a dragon in a cave that she calls Dragonstone. And then she encounters the Dothraki again. She really is about to go back to the start of her story in order to move forwards. And this seems to be Quaithe's doing, or at least she's happy to encourage Dany down this path. There's quite a rabbit hole here to go down if you wish, but one of the few times George R. R. Martin has opined on online content about his work was a decade or so ago, when he said that the Myronese Blot blog just got it, in saying that the A Dance with Dragons Daenerys plotline was about her choosing between two paths or aspects of her personality, and landing on fire and blood. So given all of this, what does it seem that Quaithe wants from Dany, or wants her to do? Well, she wants her to survive. She warns her about some real present threats, people wanting to steal her dragons in Qarth, the Pale Mare in Meereen. She wants her to trust no one else outside of her own close circle, and Quaithe herself. She wants her to be truly Targaryen. She wants her to get to Westeros with her dragons. And she wants her to know the truth from Asshai. Let's deal with the Asshai thing first, because clearly Dany doesn't go to Asshai, despite Quaithe's apparent urgings. The boring literary answer is probably that this fell victim to George's Gardner writing style and his decision not to include a 5-year time jump between books. But in-world, Dany not going to Asshai is easily understood as her simply not taking Quaithe's advice. Quaithe told her she should go there and learn some truth, and Dany decided to do something different. Why did Quaithe want Dany to go to Asshai? For knowledge, presumably. When Aegon V wanted to hatch dragon eggs, he sent for pyromancers from Asshai. The legend of Azor Ahai seems to have come from Asshai, and Quaithe herself obviously also at least spent some time there. Might Quaithe believe that Dany is Azor Ahai reborn? It seems to fit the facts, and it could well fit in with some other dreams that Dany had about destroying an army dressed in ice with dragonfire, or trying to escape something cold, for example. But let's come back to that and first look at who Quaithe might be. The fact that she is masked all the time does raise a question in our minds, as well as the fact that she can speak fluent Westerosi. Odd for a woman from Asshai living in Qarth, and she is clearly a magic user and seer of visions from the future in some way, and seems to be wanting to advise Dany rather than steal her dragons, say. The boring, straightforward answer here is that she is what she presents herself to be, a shadowbinder from Qarth who sees something in Dany and is trying to help. But that doesn't explain why. In particular, why she wants Dany to lean into her Targaryen self, not trust people and so on. Might it be that the mask hides someone we, the reader, might know? I'll admit that I usually dislike this line of thought. My view is that the world is often a much larger and more complex place if not everyone is secretly someone else. But this time, I think that there might be something in it. Because why would a random magic user from the other side of the world be so keen on Dany remembering who she is, a Targaryen, unless she also had an interest in Targaryens? And why does she care so much about Dany personally? So let's go back to those clues. A magic user, speaks fluent Westerosi, hides her face, so perhaps something about that might be a clue, wants Dany to reclaim her Targaryen fire and blood approach to life and not trust anyone, and apparently comes from Asshai. That rules out a lot of possible candidates. A Targaryen-linked magic user who was probably in Westeros at some point and then headed east. Oh, and connected to stars, because stars are mentioned a lot in connection with Quaithe. Some in the A Song of Ice and Fire community have suggested Ashara Dane. The star symbolism would certainly work, and she is missing, presumed dead, but there was never a hint that she was a magic user, or that she particularly knew or cared about her lady's husband's young sister Dany, and there's no particular reason why she might have escaped all the way to Asshai. It's possible, but seems to be driven more by a desire for Ashara Dane to reappear in the story than the clues we already have to Quaithe's identity. So let's look at the other name that has often been suggested, Shira Seastar. She was one of the great bastards of Aegon IV, along with Bloodraven, Bittersteel and Daemon Blackfire. Though of the four, she's definitely the one we know least about. Her mother was from Essos and was reputedly a sorceress, and this is how George R. R. Martin described her for Amok, an artist whose excellent work often appears on this channel, to help with a picture. There's a link to Amok's work in the description. This is what George said. She was the greatest beauty of her age, a slender and elegant woman, slim of waist and full of breast. She had the silver-gold hair of the Targaryens, thick and curling, and wore it very long. She had a heart-shaped face, full lips, and her mismatched eyes were strangely large and full of mischief. Her rivals said she used them to melt men's hearts. Even at an early age, she was a great reader. She spoke 12 tongues and surrounded herself with ancient scrolls. Like her mother, she was reputed to practice the dark arts. So immediately we have someone who might wish to cover their face to avoid being recognised, has a link to Essos through her mother, is multilingual and a magic user, and as a Targaryen closely associated with Bloodraven and the search for the prince that was promised, her fascination with Dany makes a lot of sense. We even have a confident assertion from a young egg that she bathes in blood to keep her youthful looks. And as a literary mirror, in different ways, to Bloodraven and Melisandre, it makes thematic sense if she has managed to live a long life through magical means. But why might she be in a Shy if she was born in Westeros? Well, I'll be honest that this was for a long time the missing link for me. She seemed to fit the clues we had, but I couldn't link her across to a Shy. In truth, she rather disappears from the narrative we have in the world of Ice and Fire. We get no explanation of what happened to her. She was definitely around while Bloodraven was Hand of the King to Aerys I. We read about that in the Dunk and Egg stories, but then it all goes a bit quiet. Then I noticed that just a few years later, we had a clear link across from the Targaryens to a Shy. Aegon V, that's Egg when he becomes king, became obsessed with trying to hatch dragon eggs, and we read that he commissioned journeys to places as far away as a Shy by the Shadow, with the hopes of finding texts and knowledge that had not been preserved in Westeros. We have no more detail than that, but who might he send? This was clearly important to him, so he needed someone he could trust, who perhaps shared his desire to hatch dragons, someone who could speak the language and would be able to distinguish between real magic and charlatans. Shira Seastar seems easily the most obvious choice. She was family. She was from Essos, spoke many languages, was magically inclined, spent her time surrounded by ancient scrolls. Yes, unless there was a rift we don't know anything about, it would be a surprise if he didn't send her. So it makes sense for Shira to be there in a Shy, and as she was obsessed with magical tomes and the like, it makes sense that she might have stayed there for a time. Though a Shy with its constant gloom and lack of fresh water and fresh food may not be somewhere you want to stay for a long time, hence Qarth. And thus far I think we can say that all this makes logical sense and fits the facts, though we don't have any specific supporting evidence. But when we meet Quaithe, that changes immediately, because the Seastar supporting evidence is almost overwhelming. The first time she appears magically to Dany, she hears seawater lapping against her boat. The second, she is in water, in a bath, and moonlight shines from Quaithe's eyes. The third time, we get this repeated language. The stars wheeled around her and whispered secrets in her ear. "Quaithe," Dany called. "Where are you, Quaithe?" Then she saw. Her mask is made of starlight. So Quaithe's mask, the thing that hides her identity, is made of starlight, like Shira Seastar. And then we get to what Quaithe clearly wants from Dany. She wants to keep her safe, to prevent others from stealing her dragons, for her not to trust the myriad of voices around her, and ultimately to embrace her Targaryen nature. "Remember who you are, Daenerys," the stars whispered in a woman's voice. "The dragons know. Do you?" Let's say Shira Seastar did travel to a Shy, read their ancient prophecies and learn their magic, then headed to the comfort of Qarth, as all seems very possible. How would she react if Dany suddenly emerged out of the Red Waste with 3 dragon hatchlings? I think exactly how she did react, warning her about the dangers of Quaithe, all the people who would try to take her dragons or trick her, try to get her to embrace her inner Targaryen, not just become a foreign queen ruling over Meereen through compromise. She may even get a bit emotional at seeing Dany when she thought all of her family were dead, and magic gone forever, and dragons gone forever. And sure enough, when Dany does see her, she sees this. Yet there she stood, eyes wet and shiny behind the implacable red lacquer mask. Was that Quaithe crying? And all this might be exacerbated if Shearer had by this point also come to the conclusion that Dany was Azor Ahai reborn, which she may have done. We're told that legend comes from Ashai, and I don't think it's a coincidence that just before Quaithe magically appears to Dany the first time, Dany gets a vision of her riding Balerion and burning or melting an army of ice. Dany wakes to think that this is how it was meant to be. And then Quaithe appears, pretty on the nose. And it's also an echo of a dream that Jon gets, we think, from Bloodraven, of him seemingly as the same Prince that was promised figure, with a flaming sword atop the wall killing the undead. Which brings me to the literary irony of all this, and why I consider that George R.R. Martin would love the idea of Quaithe being Shearer Seastar. Bloodraven and Shearer were close, very close. They were lovers and magical collaborators in the most magical era of Targaryen rule. There is every reason to believe that they were together trying to identify or bring about somehow the birth of the prince that was promised through the Targaryen line in Westeros. The most important and central task for both of them, saving the world from the threat of the others. Long story short, Bloodraven went to the wall, then north of the wall, then became a tree wizard, and decided that Jon, as the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, must be the prince that was promised. It's too much of a digression for this video, but he guides him, protects him, sends him weapons to use against the others, gives him visions, etc. How ironic would it be if Shearer Seastar, his lover and confidant, had left for Essos a bit later, fell out of contact with him, then stumbled across Dany and decided that she was the prince that was promised. Both of them unknown to the other as they had fallen out of contact. Bloodraven even tells Bran that he tried to contact her and failed, were now guiding their candidate towards their fate as they saw it. And at some point in the next 2 books, they will finally meet. It just works at a literary and emotional level. Who is the real prince or princess that was promised? If you'd like to see more videos like this one, diving deep into George R.R. Martin's world, there's a playlist appearing now on the left of your screen. Or if you'd like to support this channel, thank you. There's a link now on the right of your screen to my Patreon page. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.